Hi, welcome to STP Talks. I'm Zach Antonucci. I'm joined by Head of Settlements at STP, Keisha Schnoll. Welcome, Keisha, and congratulations on your recent appointment to joining a settlements working group with Azitzi. Just got off the conference circuit with you and Asset Ops panelist as well.
Yeah, thanks, Zach. It's good to be here with you and ready to, start talking about the hot topic right now, which is T plus one.
Yeah, exactly. So we can jump right into it. As the head of settlements, we work with over 25 clients today. And as you're onboarding clients and you're speaking to prospective clients, maybe you could talk a little bit about a few things that they struggle with, or maybe not struggle is the right word, but what they could do as an improvement process and how they're starting to get ready for either T plus one in Europe or really just their settlements process as a whole.
Yeah, that's a good question, Zach. And, just to kind of start out, I would say at its simplest, SCP trade settlements really exists to take settlements off of our clients' plates. Most firms today are handling settlement in house. They're stitching together their different technology systems, vendors, and manual processes. Whether it's monitoring trades, chasing breaks, managing settlement instructions, and resolving exceptions market by market. So, what we do differently at STP is we own the entire trade settlement workflow for the clients. We take responsibility for getting the trades from the execution through final settlement. And um, we're really owning that process. We're taking on the risk from the clients and we're doing all the coordination on their behalf. Um, Again, matching, managing settlement instructions, the confirm and affirmation process, handling exceptions with all counterparties, and utilizing Swift messaging to communicate to the various custodians on the client's behalf. Again, just to kind of reiterate the key difference, our in-house models are typically system centric and, firms manage those tools, whereas STP's model is really outcome centric as we manage the settlement process. That really means that clients don't just get that technology, they get an operating partner. And we already understand how the markets behave, where they break, and how to fix those issues quickly, especially when, timelines compress as they are under T plus one.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you. And I think you kind of hit on a couple of great chords there that maybe we could pull on a little bit. So one of them obviously is T plus one in Europe, which is a buzz in all the conferences right now, and you're seeing a lot of headlines about it. So maybe that idea of an outcome approach versus focusing on the tech, and like why is that so important for T1? I know you just mentioned a great buzzword, compress. But like why does that make this so much more important for folks? And maybe talk a little bit about the time compression and what that does for operational practitioners.
Yeah. So, today how a typical trade flow works, the traders are executing at the end of the market close. Then they're sending them to brokers for allocations. And that's kind of where you get into the nitty gritty of the actual trade settlement process. So by sending trades at market close, you have a couple hours where, the broker's matching you out on CTM. You're making sure that your settlement instructions are in place and then ultimately sending the trade instructions to custody. So, in between that time, the market is closed in, referring specifically to the EU markets. So by the time the trade is instructed to the custody, the market is closed and there's no way to gauge whether the trade is pre-matched in the market because of the time. So, typically in current day, we're making sure that the trade is pre-matched in the market on T plus one. Taking that away is a huge difference to all operators because we're not going to have time to, check all the various custodian websites, review all of the settlement messages that are coming back from the various counterparties. It's going to kind of change from reactionary to proactive environment. So, from an operator perspective, that significantly changes the workflow and just really kind of reiterates the importance on having automation in place.
Yeah, sure. And I think that there's, again, another conversation that we've been having both internally here and with folks across the industry is this idea that, hey, the US moved to T+1, all is well by all the metrics that have been provided out there for folks looking at the analytics, is this idea that fail rates dropped, pre-matching increased, funding went back into the marketplace, right? And I think that the playbook really hasn't been written, right? You're talking about 30 plus markets, depending on what day of the week it is, right? Europe can't seem to agree on everything across 4 different time zones, multi-currency, whereas the US was one central clearing depository, one currency. You could argue maybe another one in there, right? But so from fundamentally, like you're talking about, like it's just all that and more important to have standard operating procedures in place, have the technology in place, and importantly, like having a team like yours in place with experienced practitioners that aren't just moonlighting and doing this as part of the job, but this is really their focus.
Yeah, that's a good point, Zach. I mean, T+1 in the US, it did go great, right? They started the conversations early. DTC was out there educating its clients. We kind of already had CTM in place, Trade Suite offering that automated mechanism for matching and affirmation, and they develop their own playbook. However, as you mentioned, when we're looking at Europe, we have all of these different processes. It is not a streamlined approach, especially when you have, various counterparties and custodians. Some accept Swift messages and some do not. Some want faxes, some want manual trade files. So that, really creates friction in the trade instruction process. So, I think everyone really kind of needs to come to an agreement on a standard set of instructions, how we're getting the instructions ultimately to the custodian to post and to settlement time. And, another thing that I think is important to mention is, because there are so many different clearing custodians in all these various countries, the instructions can change very quickly and regularly. We don't see that in the US markets, right? You're typically, you have one DTC number for, ever, and then that's kind of it. So, another intricacies of those European markets is that the custodian can change their global custodian at any point. So that requires settlement instructions being changed. So, not only does it for lack of a better term, force the clients, the operators to update their settlement instructions, but you also have to rely on your other counterparties updating the settlement instructions.
Yep.
That again, that can be a huge manual process that should be automated somehow.
Yeah, for sure. And you mentioned the DTCC participant numbers, right? And it gave me like flashbacks to when I was in operations and had all the different numbers ingrained in my head I could probably still
Yeah.
recite today.
Yeah,
But
and they're the same. They're going to be
yeah.
the same as you remember.
um, I think, maybe along those lines that you're talking about settlement instructions changing. And again, something that always is top of mind for me is maybe like KPIs and metrics and getting ahead of things. So, um, are there platforms that we're using at STP? Are there platforms that people should be looking at that maybe help them from an AI perspective, maybe predictive analysis that, hey, watch out for broker XYZ in this market, like their fail rate is above average for the market. Like, can you talk about like what you do from that perspective and maybe how you work with our clients or what asset managers are doing it and how should be aware of?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that metrics have become much more prevalent in today's world, especially post T plus one, because, that's kind of what the market was stressing. You need to be matched by a certain time. So I use a combination of things internally at STP, but DTC does have a great CTM scorecard. So you can kind of utilize that to track your broker performance. Of course, we, use our vendor platform to pull reporting on metrics. And then, just kind of tracking that against what volumes our clients are pushing out, what variables could be changing those metrics on a monthly basis. So that's definitely something that we're really monitoring. And I think that it is crucial to track broker performance at this point to, like you said, Zach, to really pinpoint those who might be matching late or always have settlement instruction issues or don't open accounts timely. Those kind of three items are going to need to be addressed before we move to T plus one in the EU.
Yeah, and I think that that's a great point too. Like you mentioned, like before we do it, right? So if we look at the calendar today, T plus one goes live October 11th, 2027 in the EU, right? But I think a lot of people are focused on the finish line of October, but they're not aware that there is actually some like gate checks before we even get there. So I think maybe that might be helpful for folks is who are starting the conversation today, like they're already late out of the starting blocks, right? Like you should have already been looking at this. Like, can you talk a little bit about what's happening between now and October and some of the things that you would recommend that they start thinking about or doing?
Yeah, so I think that, from a market perspective, definitely join any webinars that you can. Join working groups. Any information that you can take in before the move to T plus one in the EU is going to be vital. DTC offers, great webinars. All they're partnering with many financial firms to offer, very good insight onto how to prepare for things like this. Um, from an SCP perspective, what's on my to-do list is, not only kind of send out, marketing materials to prepare them, but just kind of have those one-on-one conversations with them. Like, hey, this is what's happening. This is what could be impacted based on your current workflow. And then pulling in those metrics, right? Broker ABC always is matching us late. Can we do something? Can we partner with the front office to come to a solution on a more automated mechanism for matching? And then another item that I'm going to focus on is how custodians are receiving their trade instructions. As I, mentioned before, there are several custodians that aren't Swift enabled today, and I think that is going to be a non-negotiable for T plus one. Especially given the financial risk behind these trades. Um,
Yep.
so yeah, really, I just would love to express the need for education and realizing that this is a workflow change. And I know I said that with T plus one in the US, but um I feel like this is so much more um difficult to navigate because of all of those CSDs and the financial impacts that could be
Yep.
behind this.
Yeah, you know what? We're winding down on time, but I think you just hit on something that's, moves this conversation outside of just like perhaps a COO or head of operations role, or head of trade settlements role, right? every event is a P&L event now, right? Every failed trade is a P&L event potentially. And it just seems to be another moving target. And again, adding to the complexity of going across 30 plus CSDs is they all have different penalties on failed trades, whether it's on a basis point level or an age level, right? So why spend the calories and the time figuring all that out? Just settle the trade in the first place, right?
Yeah, and while I hate to say it, I do think that the financial risk behind these is going to be the motivator.
Yep.
That was kind of like the number one question we were getting when the T+1 was coming into the United States was, what is the impact?
Yep.
Other than the trade failing, there's no financial risk behind it. So this changes the conversation because, as you said, it is a P&L hit.
Yep.
So and it's also CSDR regulated. That is a regulation that all of these firms have to comply with. And failing consistently and accruing fees is one thing, but it could also potentially restrict your trading in that markets.
Cool.
So I think that's, something that the front office also needs to focus on. And my hope would be that the front, back, and middle office really all work together to, brainstorm how we can move forward with compressing these timelines and settlement deadlines, how it's going to, really benefit all parties.
Yep. Yeah, so I guess we can wrap things up, and besides just wishing people good luck, maybe if you had one more final thought or to just put a bow on everything that we've talked about today, if you could offer just one piece of advice for those folks listening, what would it be besides giving us a call, right? Mm.
Yeah, that's the $1 million question, right? I think that my kind of last piece would just be that T+1 in the EU isn't just about moving faster, it's being aligned with the markets. So again, many firms are still underestimating how important it is to have clear ownership and coordination across the post-trade workflow. So shortening that settlement life cycle works best when data, matching, instructions, and exception handling are well connected across systems and partners. So, the firms that focus early on alignment and transparency will be best positioned for a smooth transition.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, thanks again for your time. I know you and I are working on a couple blogs that are going to come out, so stay tuned for that. But thanks everyone for joining STP Talks, and please feel free to reach out where we'd love to thought share with you.
Thank you. Thanks, Zach.